Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Blaine Edwards, and today we're joined by Conor, Technical Communications Lead at deFIRE, a DeFi platform and DEX aggregator for Cardano. So, Conor, cheers for coming on the show.
Howdy, howdy. Mr. Blaine, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Cheers for coming on the show. Got a lot to talk about, but before we dive into all of that juicy stuff, can you please tell the podcast a bit about who you are and also maybe a brief story around how you got involved with this beautiful world of crypto?
Definitely. So I guess we'll start off with who I am. I came in, my name is Conor. I'm a technical communications lead for deFIRE, which is a project that IDO'd on Occam Finance back in May. And we aim to be a DEX aggregator for all the DEXs that come out on Cardano. For me personally, I'm a young guy. I came out of university I graduated from university back in May of this year with a degree in electrical engineering. And so I had been in college for the past 4 or 5 years, and I was able to kind of watch the industry. I really started to take note back in 2018 and kind of watched it. Just really observed it. I didn't really do too much with it mostly because I was really just busy with my studies and focused on that. And then right out of college when I graduated, I just immediately kind of got stuck into it, and kind of like leading up to the peak of it the peak of Bitcoin when it happened at 60K back in April, May timeframe. And I've been in it ever since, and kind of got involved with a lot of the communities, just following some stuff, and then eventually worked my way into deFIRE, and then kind of worked my way up the ladder inside of deFIRE itself, and now also working kind of for Occam. And so it feels like it's a really nice natural progression of what I studied, electrical engineering, and being able to kind of apply that within cryptocurrency. And really, for me, it's more of a passion about the whole technology, because that's probably the biggest interest for me, and trying to bring that technology into the mainstream. Because the benefits so far that we've seen, that we talk about in all these research papers and that we see around the space, I think once they kind of gain mass adoption, it's going to be truly revolutionary. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, the scale of this technology and the impact that it can have is global. And because we're still early days, these benefits, a lot of them are just theoretical. They're on paper. This potentially could happen. So the super exciting for me and for most people in the space is actually seeing this impact in the real world. And we're so close, you can almost grab it. So that's your story into the space. If we pivot to deFIRE, can you talk about what deFIRE is?
Yeah, so the best corollary to deFIRE, or the best analogy, would be 1inch on Ethereum, if people are familiar with that. If not, think of it as we are essentially aggregating and bringing together all the liquidity and all the assets of any DEX on Cardano. So you have all these different DEXs potentially coming out: ErgoDex, Sunday Swap, Occam's DEX, MinSwap, all these different swaps. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take or connect all of them via their APIs and aggregate all of their prices together in one location. And so if you have asset A on DEX 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we look at the various different prices and say, hey, you're going to get asset A for the best price on DEX number 4, and then we'll have that price ready for you to swap. And so you'll go ahead and swap, and it'll just be an in and out, same as you would be swapping on another DEX. And so we really feel that deFIRE is going to be something really interesting to look for in Cardano, because we have all these projects, all these DEX market makers coming out. And if we see, double digit, 15, 20 DEXs coming out, all with varying amounts of liquidity, then a DEX aggregator to aggregate all of those assets together into one place while still supporting them as in a decentralized nature is truly going to be really, really healthy for the ecosystem.
Yeah, so intuitively, an aggregator makes sense, but can you maybe break down the specific problems you're solving with an aggregator like deFIRE? Is it purely just, what are the benefits? So finding the best prices, is that, I guess, the main one?
Yeah, the main one is going to be the best prices. And then additionally, we are also kind of approaching this from a business to business attitude. We do have a lot of support from centralized exchange services. And those centralized exchange services primarily deal with business to business interactions. And so they're interacting with other centralized exchanges and facilitating trades in between. And so we are kind of approaching that with the same mindset, because if you think about it, if the liquidity is kind of interspersed between 10 to 15 different locations, then you're going to have isolated pockets of communities that on DEX 1 you may support assets A, C, and D, but on DEX 2 you may support assets X, Y, and Z. And so rather than having to have a bunch of tabs for all these different DEXs and making it a bit more complicated, we'll say, hey, you just come to deFIRE and then you have access to every single asset that's listed on any possible exchange. And so, well, certainly you can definitely go to use any of these DEXs, and I imagine plenty of people will, just for an easy in and out, just to be done with it and not to be make it a big hassle. You'll just have the option to just go to deFIRE and then make the purchase that way. And whether or not you want to deep dive and try to find all these different assets on different DEXs, you can just see it all up front in deFIRE.
Gotcha. And in terms of aggregating the liquidity from these different exchanges, is it just decentralized exchanges? Do you tap into centralized exchanges, or is it just DEXs?
Yeah, so right now, it's interesting because that's kind of something we're formulating. We've already put out on our website the minimum viable product, the second version of that. And that is based on a centralized exchange. And so we're routing through a centralized exchange. And so we already have, so basically it's like demonstrated that we can work with a centralized exchange and work through multiple centralized exchanges. And then obviously the next iteration is going to be DEX focused, and this is going to be built on Ethereum. And so we'll aggregate some more Ethereum DEXs to say, okay, this is the next logical step in progression until we move into the actual Cardano DEXs. Because I imagine right out of the gate of September 12th, we're not going to have all these DEXs going to go live. We already know decentralized exchanges like Sunday Swap are going to be live in October or further down the road. And so what we're focused at the moment on only aggregating decentralized exchanges. We are still looking at operating within the realm of centralized exchanges, because if we can give an avenue for centralized exchanges to interact with us, because that is one of our target consumers, for centralized exchanges to be able to tap into deFIRE in order to wrap their orders and then to have them interact with DEXs. Because right now it's essentially kind of confined, if you think about it. When you have orders on centralized exchanges, it's all essentially interacting within the same centralized exchange wallets or within a few centralized exchange wallets, and they're not really getting access to the wider ecosystem of total liquidity that would exist on whatever chain. So,
just so I can make sense of the kind of the user experience. So if I hop on the deFIRE DEX and I place an order, and let's say you use your smart order routing engine, I think is what you call it on your website. Yes, and then you identify the best price at that moment is on the Sunday Swap DEX using their liquidity. When you process that order, do you add then a small fee, like a deFIRE fee on top of that price?
Yeah, so how this is going to work is you're going to have fee collection kind of both ways. And this kind of what the token for deFIRE itself comes into, because you're having the order sent through the deFIRE router into the Sunday Swap, and then collecting fees kind of both ways. And that's kind of how the token is interacting. And this is an interesting thing to think about, because we have, obviously, people are going to have varying order sizes. Some people are going to place a $500, $1,000, $10,000, multiple $1,000 orders. And so if something's going to flow through Sunday Swap, for an order that's maybe $500, that's simple enough. But, for an order that's, say, $10,000, you may not necessarily want to route that specifically through one decentralized exchange. And so we may not want to send $10,000 straight to Sunday Swap. You might want to break that up because it's maybe more economically efficient to route it to other routers. And so with that all in mind, kind of how that reflects itself in the fees is that's all going to kind of be paid out to the stakers of the CWAP token, which is the deFIRE token. And so, and then if we want to talk about this later, this is kind of an interesting proposition for a lot of these centralized exchanges, because that's how a lot of the revenue or a lot of the value for the CWAP holders is going to be generated once we get kind of a large order routing solidified and figured out.
Gotcha. So from my noobish understanding, it seems like if I was to place an order, it would just make sense to place an order on a DEX aggregator. Is there any reason why someone wouldn't place an order on an aggregator as opposed to just picking any other DEX? Like, are there specific use cases where it may make sense not to use an aggregator, or?
Yeah.
Like,
so, So if we look at like the current landscape of, so like ICOs were the flavor of the year in 2017. I think the flavor of the year now is kind of IDOs, which are DEX offerings. And so it makes sense to use a DEX in the sense of if a project is coming in, they're going to release other tokens on the DEX at someday, sometime, then obviously using a DEX and add-ins, this is just going to be, it's going to make sense, because we're not going to necessarily be able to update, contracts, update token pools to reflect that brand new token that launched, 5 minutes ago. So, using a DEX in that sense to get first access to a project makes sense. Additionally, like using a DEX that you're just comfortable with. Some people are just going to, stick with Sunday swap or stick with min swap, stick with whatever swap they want to use, and they're just going to use that, and that's perfectly fine, because that's what they're comfortable with using. And I think honestly, for kind of smaller orders, that may make sense for some people, just because they just want to go buy a token for however many $50, $100, whatever, and then be done with it. If you're a more kind of structured, for a trader, someone who's trying to be very economical with everything, then using a decentralized exchange aggregator is going to be the more viable route, because you're going to be able to kind of get a snapshot of the entire ecosystem and then get that price for the best rates possible.
Yeah. So you mentioned Occam. You guys launched on Occam Finance.
Yes, sir.
What was so you have an Ethereum-based token at the moment.
Yeah.
What was the rationale for going through Occam and going with Ethereum-based token first, and then transitioning to Cardano, as opposed to kind of just waiting until Cardano? Like, can you step through maybe that rationale?
Definitely. Yeah, it's a really good question. I get it a lot. And the best way to respond to this is we are providing, Ethereum allows us to kind of put out proof of concept, proof of work, and show us that, hey, we actually do have competence in building a product. We already have our second version of the MVP, which is live, people can use. People don't obviously that they don't necessarily have to trade, but they can get a flavor or a taste of what it's going to be like. They can interact with the interface. They can send dummy transactions, or select the swap and let it go to the MetaMask and reject and try again and see how it would work. So launching on Ethereum for us was like, hey, we have all this experience with Solidity and everything already. Let's go build multiple different versions of the MVP and get as close as possible to what the final version of the product would look like on Cardano, which is the next step of the next phase of the MVP. And then once September 12th rolls around, then as all these DEXs start coming online, because that's kind of implicit in the development of our product, is we do need other DEXs, because if there's only one or two DEXs on Cardano, then there's no real need for a DEX aggregator, because people can just go visit those DEXs easily enough. But once obviously as more DEXs, all these guys start releasing, and as we get into October, November, December timeframe, I hope there's going to be a lot of DEXs. I hope a lot of people come out with products to kind of innovate, but then that's when deFIRE is really going to shine, because then we can actually implement the use case, and we'll have a viable reason to exist. And that translation from what it looks like on Ethereum with smart contracts and the whole structure is relatively analogous to what it's going to look like on Cardano. And then just getting an understanding and, fixing all the bugs and errors that we encountered on Ethereum will be not exactly the same, because obviously Solidity and Plutus are two different things. But the problems are all going to rhyme, and we already have experience in kind of developing a product for that. So developing a product on Plutus is going to be a much more straightforward thing than developing it from first principle on Ethereum.
Yeah, gotcha. You mentioned something interesting around if there's only two dexes on a blockchain, there's probably less of a need for an aggregator, dex aggregator. So there's almost like the value of a dex aggregator is correlated with like the number of dexes there are in the ecosystem. So
Yep.
at the very beginning, let's say DeFi has this value. If you assume that that ecosystem is going to grow, then the value of DeFi is probably going to increase as well because you're aggregating from more liquidity pools, which is an angle I haven't really thought about until you just said that before.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like I think you would be it would be fine to measure a system's growth and total like value of it, as well as the ability to be decentralized by its maybe number of automated market makers. Because I'm not here to obviously take shots at Ethereum because it's a great thing to look at as an example, but you have everything centralized into one area and all the innovations in one area, whereas obviously as we continue to grow and all these dexes hopefully come out and we see all the different innovations that every single one of them has on the original automated market idea, then we'll be able to kind of support them. And so it'll be like a nice measure of the strength of Cardano, as well as hopefully the decentralization of Cardano, because I don't necessarily want to see everything combined into the Occam DEX or the Sunday DEX or whatever DEX.
So you mentioned centralized with the Ethereum and the DEXs there. Are you talking about the centralization of liquidity within Ethereum?
Yes. Yeah.
So what does that look like currently with Ethereum, and why is that potentially an issue?
Yeah, it's just I think with any large system, you just see this in any bureaucracy or any administration, no matter kind of wherever you go. Uniswap is a very robust system. It works fantastically. Aside from obviously the gas issues, that's not a Uniswap issue. That's just a greater Ethereum issue in general. But I think it has kind of, and this is just because of how it came about. Since Uniswap was the very first one to come out, a lot of other DEXs have kind of copy and pasted and adjusted minor things here and there, but they've all been kind of similar versions, similar templates of the Uniswap formula, and haven't really iterated on it too much. And so that's probably also a reason why you don't see too much of a big difference between Uniswap and a lot of the other DEXs that are offered. There are certain innovations like Bancor, Balancer, but you can probably list all of those on one hand, and there's 4 or 5 of them. And then because they're all built off of the same principle, there's not that kind of spark of innovation. Whereas with Cardano, I feel like there's going to be a lot more interesting things that are coming about, because certainly, a lot of them may take a look at the Uniswap system and may kind of go from there. But a lot of them seem to be developing independently from what I've researched on a lot of these DEXs, and are trying to come up with their own answers to solutions from Plutus and what Plutus is able to offer them, and trying to implement how they would view their own DEXs. So,
yeah, there's definitely exciting times ahead with Cardano in general, but also with DeFi. I think a lot of people are excited about DeFi and also NFTs, because these are parts of the crypto world that we can actually use and interact and engage with. You mentioned before that I guess starting on Ethereum was kind of, in a sense, a way for you to kind of prove the concept and test out things and to see if this all works. So considering that was, I guess, the strategy for launching on Ethereum, and there's been some time since you started on Ethereum, what are some things that you guys have learned through that whole journey so far, and how are you using those learnings to improve the product of DeFi?
Yeah, definitely. And the main teachers for us have just been how do I phrase this? The reworking of a lot of the smart contracts and a lot of the smart contract testing, because we are obviously very concerned with and very much focused on security of a lot of the contracts. We intend on handling lots of information in regards to, or lots of value if we are aiming for, a potential business to business mindset and aiming for centralized exchanges, which are handling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of value. We want to make sure all the contracts are airtight and a lot of the system is airtight. And so as we're putting out the MVPs, we are getting feedback from the community as well as constantly poking and prodding and trying to break our system as much as possible. And a lot of this is just front-end stuff, back-end stuff. It's not necessarily anything specific to Solidity or specific to Plutus, which is even better because that means there's kind of less stuff that we have to adjust whenever we get over to Plutus. Because there's we released the MVP for like a few hours at the beginning of August, discovered some stuff, went back, decided to rework it, paused, and then re-released it a few days ago because we were like, hey, there's some bugs, there's some features that we need to adjust. And that's just another thing that we've learned. And then we are doing essentially a complete UI overhaul for the very next iteration of the MVP. And we expect, we've already learned a bunch of stuff in regards to kind of the UI design, what people like, what people don't like. And so it's just, it's a constant iteration process. And so far the developers and I have been very pleased with kind of the way we've been able to go about iterating upon the product as well as kind of the reception towards the community. So,
yeah, awesome. So the MVP, you're on MVP 2.0?
Yes, 2.0, yes, sir.
And that's been live for a few days. What has the feedback been from the community regards to using this MVP 2.0?
Yeah, definitely. So we expected the next MVP 3.0, I guess, is going to offer a lot more detail and analytics relating to a lot of the swaps, charts, pricing stuff, just a more in-depth view. And so we expected honestly to see that reflected in the feedback from this. And so aside from the excitement that we had this out, a lot of it was like, hey, we want breakdowns of the token purchases, different pricing, different fees, whatever's being paid, gas, stuff like that. Snapshots of charts, 7-day, hour, whatever type of chart you want to have access to it, which is perfect because we already have a lot of that in place for the next MVP. There was some like minor stuff kind of related to back-end critiques, but that was already being addressed in the first place. And so to kind of sum it up, it was a lot of feedback that we were kind of aware of and we were already taking steps to address. And so it was like a good confirmation. that we have we can kind of see what the atmosphere is and understand kind of what people want before they even have to tell us, which is, I think, a really good place to be in.
Yeah, definitely reassuring from a building point of view if you can anticipate, I guess, the user experience from someone. Yeah, definitely. We've been talking about Ethereum. We've been talking about Cardano. Obviously, I love Cardano. I actually I like Ethereum too. I like Vitalik. I think he's a freaking legend. Yeah. I hope that him and Charles can be friends one day, to be honest.
Yes.
Again,
yes.
That would be amazing, by the way. Obviously, Cardano is the focus of this podcast. Why Cardano? Why build this on Cardano?
Yeah. So, I was buying an NFT yesterday and it was like $250 just to sign the transaction for like a $50 NFT. So that's probably the biggest thing right there. We honestly take a look at the way Cardano and IOG, the whole the main overhead group that kind of leads Cardano, is approaching the idea of emerging markets and is approaching the way they are interacting with a lot of the nations that are that are the constant target of the phrase banking the unbanked. We always throw that around, but seeing them take big actual physical steps towards doing that within Ethiopia, within Africa, within parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, mid-Mongolia, and then hopefully soon in South America and a lot of those countries. That's kind of been the biggest, or one of the major factors in doing that. Obviously, it's a great system to be a part of because they are taking a lot of time and putting a lot of effort into being exact with the things that they're releasing, with all the papers, with all the academic research that's backing up a lot of the moves that they're making. It's obviously not happening in a day. It's taking time, which, that's perfectly fine, because yeah, the products that they're releasing are very airtight and are very much stress tested, which is perfect for us, because if we're trying to have different relations with, at the moment, centralized exchanges, and hopefully in the future with actual, nation states and companies and large organizations of people, we want to be able to provide them with credibility and show them that we are actually a safe thing to use. Both deFIRE, Occam, and I imagine any other product within the system wants to show, hey, we're built on principles that are airtight, and you're not going to have a hack where you lose, a significant portion of money. And then for me, like personally, I live in Texas, in America, and that's, we look a lot towards the south, towards Mexico, Central America, and South America. And so seeing projects like World Mobile Token that are kind of building within the Cardano space, the same space that we are building in, is very, very good to see, because I feel like a product like deFIRE, and like all these DEXs, which may seem a few levels of abstraction higher than the common person, are very important steps towards reaching those people, that are in America, South America, and Mexico, and Central America, and really kind of improving their quality of life, and then bringing them up into kind of like the world stage, and allowing them to actually be kind of a force to reckon with, rather than just kind of being an afterthought in a lot of the global community.
Yeah, no, definitely. The Cardano approach is the methodical, slow, I think it's quite fast considering what we're trying to do, but it's very methodical, and a byproduct of that is things are more airtight. And you want things airtight when you're dealing with money, when you're dealing with ownership, when you're dealing with identity. You don't want to be kind of just close your eyes and then kind of throw a dart at the dartboard. You want there to be a lot of logic behind that decision-making process. And for me, that's Cardano with the research approach and all of that. So it's very fundamental if you're trying to create an operating system of the world, which I think Cardano will be. You really need to be thinking, like you mentioned, first principles, taking the first principles approach at the fundamental levels. And that's Cardano for me. We talked about the deFi MVP 2.0 being live. Can you talk about the rest of the roadmap for deFi? What are some product, like how can people interact with deFi? What are some milestones coming up, mainly for the rest of the year and maybe early next year?
Definitely. So the biggest thing for us is so we released the MVP 2.0 a few days ago. We're going to have liquidity mining just to show people how it's going to work whenever we actually port it over to Cardano. And so they'll be able to mine the CWAP token with Ethereum. And then the next major step will be MVP 3.0, which is going to divorce ourselves from centralized exchanges. And it's only going to be aggregating a collection of, it's like 5 or 6 Ethereum DEXs. And so that'll be the closest analogy that we have to what it's going to look like on Cardano. We expect that September timeframe. And so that'll be good, because it'll, smart contracts will launch on the 12th of September, and then we'll have hopefully our MVP out by then, MVP 3.0. Then from there is when we really put in a fair amount of work moving over to MVP 4.0, which at that point is going to be examples of how we're going to look on Cardano. We're back and forth with the Occam team. They're providing a lot of technical oversight for us, because obviously they're putting together, Occam has their own DEX that Occam is putting together. And then we're kind of getting the first glimpse into how a lot of the mechanics are working in this. At the end of the day, it's going to be rather similar, because you have kind of like just a routing service with deFIRE that connects into various different APIs, and then can do calls and send orders and work from there. And that's how it works in Ethereum. And it's roughly going to work the same in Cardano. Obviously, the UTXO model does add throws a bit of a wrench in the mix. But at the end of the day, the principles are still the same for how it works. And so hopefully we're thinking probably the 4.0 version in October to November timeframe, because by then we'll have Occam's decks out sometime around then, or at least going live at some point. And then we'll start to see a lot more dexes around that point, because I think looking at all these projects that are supposed to be coming out as decentralized exchanges, we can expect a fair amount of them out by October to November as well. And then so once they kind of go live, we'll be able to then start integrating them, looking over the code. Because for the most part, aside from, I think, Ergodex, and obviously Occam, we don't really have too much dexes to look at. Sunday is private, RaySwap is private. I think MinSwap is private as well. Maladex is private. A lot of those guys are private, which is, obviously for good reasons. They want to be, they've come up with their solution, and they want to release it whenever the DEX is live and have that first mover advantage, which is perfectly acceptable. So we'll probably have that full working product out, hopefully by end of Q4 or sometime in Q1 of 2022, which is when we'll be kind of totalizing all of the DEXs on Cardano. And then the thing to look at down the road is how we are going to interact on a cross-chain or cross-exchange manner. Like I said, we are looking at how we could potentially organize ourselves with centralized exchanges and with decentralized exchanges, but we're also focusing on, hey, if we get the Ethereum world working and we have the Cardano world working, what does it look like to put them together, and then have a service that is able to allow people to kind of migrate between both, or work between both services. I feel like that's a very interesting thing that we continue to kind of internally talk about, and then we'll probably have sometime an answer to that Q2, Q3, Q4 of 2022 down the road. We'll see like a solidified idea.
Alrighty, so that's the roadmap. How about the team? So can you briefly talk about the team that is working on this roadmap and bringing these ideas to reality?
Yeah, so we have obviously myself. We have some people in the background that aren't kind of coming forward just because of just being comfortable with it, and that's perfectly fine. We have our main CEO who's kind of interim at the moment, because we're looking for someone to come on who's completely focused on deFIRE, because our current CEO has obligations elsewhere. And so we want someone to come on who's obviously completely focused on the project, which is fine. We have all the development team, which should bring us up to 5 developers in the next week. We're going to be onboarding 2 more developers that I think do have a fair amount of experience with Haskell, which is perfectly what we need, because the current set of developers are front-end, back-end, as well as front-end, back-end, full stack, as well as mainly Solidity devs. They went through and know Plutus, based off of Plutus Pioneers program. I also went through Plutus Pioneers program, so I've also kind of been helping out. Interestingly enough, which is a lot of fun, because for me, I get to kind of interact with it, as well as then kind of go out and talk about it, talk to the community on Twitter and Telegram, and film videos and record stuff. So right now, the team is honestly being built up more and more, because we do need a lot of, we're going to need a fair amount of more developers if we're kind of aiming for that space where we're interacting on Ethereum and on Cardano, and then, with sexes and with dexes. So.
Alrighty, and so for those that are listening in, intrigued with the project and maybe want to invest and buy some of the deFIRE token, how can they get their hands on the token at the moment?
Yeah, so currently it's trading on a centralized exchange called Hotbit, HOTBit.io, as well as on Uniswap if they want to do it that way. We are looking at how the transfer of tokens is going to go onto Cardano. We know we already have access to Occam. Occam Finance released a bridge, and so you can transfer as a test. You can transfer, I think it's Ethereum to wrapped Ethereum, ADA from Cardano to wrapped ADA, and I actually have wrapped ADA in my wallet, funnily enough, as well as the Occam token to the Cardano version of it. And so I think eventually we're going to build out that whenever smart contracts come, so we can do full functionality for the CWAP token. And then it'll be kind of interesting once everything gets finalized with Cardano. Then we're going to see how token transfers and how the token is going to play between both blockchains if we do kind of aim for a dual blockchain future.
Gotcha. And these links to everything that we're talking about obviously will be in the description. Before we move on to the last couple of questions, are there any particular topics that you want to touch on before that we haven't covered yet?
We had a lot on the DEX space, which is super interesting. I think the main thing that I want people to do is to really take a look at all of the DEXs and everything that everybody has to offer. There's some big names, which is perfectly fine, but really kind of go out and go on Twitter, go research on YouTube or what have you, and try to really find some of these more not as popularized projects and DEXs, and then really kind of start interacting with them and figuring out what they're about, because we do pride ourselves, I think, the Cardano community on being decentralized. And I think that needs to happen with people kind of going out and actively, thinking about that and thinking of projects that are maybe not as strong, maybe not as big, or have as much press attention on them, and working to kind of support them, and then get an understanding of how they work and, potentially using them whenever they do release at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, this is a super exciting time for this ecosystem. There's a lot of awesome projects being built. So it's a good opportunity for people in the space to actually just go out and explore and see what's out there. Don't just hear of a project and just kind of assume that that's the best one. It's exciting to go out there and do some exploring and some researching. So I highly recommend people do that, not just with DEXs, but all the projects out there. There's a lot of builders out there. So go and do some exploring, kids. How can people connect with deFIRE and support what you guys are doing?
Definitely. So I think the easiest thing to do is just go to deFIRE.fi. So DEFIRE.fi, which is our website. It has links to our Twitter, Telegram, YouTube, Medium, and all the social media. It has links to test out the swap if you want to kind of play with that, to the token, how to buy that, and all the deck documents, white paper, everything that kind of is the centralized hub for all the information. We do have the YouTube channel that we are putting out a lot of information on. And for me, I'm doing a personal project of going through and trying to research all these DEXs that I keep coming upon every few days. I know we did a video on ADAX a week or two ago, and the next video should be on ErgoDex, and we basically just kind of go through and talk all about the decentralized exchange, what it's bringing to the community, and all the features and everything that it's kind of offering. And so hopefully we'll be able to do a video on the 14, 15, 20, however many DEXs that come out by the end of the year, hopefully.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them out there. I mean, the ones that I've stumbled upon, there's quite a lot of them out there. There's a couple of there was one DEX that someone in the community was posting about today that maybe was a bit suspect. So again, I want to emphasize, maybe when we're doing these exploring, to really do your own research and due diligence around what these projects are about, who's building them, and all that kind of stuff. Because even though this time is exciting because smart contracts around the corner and we're going to have that functionality, there's also got to be an opportunity for people to come in there and maybe exploit the community as well. So even more reason to do your own research. So I just wanted to throw that one out there, because it's
definitely
inevitably it's going to catch a lot of people off guard, and I feel for those people, because it's just one of those things. So yeah, do your own research. I just want to emphasize that point. The closing question I ask everyone here is, what excites you the most about the future of Cardano?
I am very excited for governance. I think that'll be phase 5, the final phase of Cardano. And because I live in the US, we have our political system, and I cannot wait to see the application of Cardano into how large systems, large bureaucracies, large governments work, because I think that'll kind of allow the system to clear a lot of the confusion, a lot of the opacity of it, and for the citizens to kind of get an understanding. Because, if you can, down the road, whenever it comes out, if we're able to hook up an election for a mayor or something, and every citizen is able to see, okay, we came up to this machine, we do the voting, and then we're able to see and trace the actual voting on the blockchain, and see how all this happens for mayoral elections, for congressional, for presidential elections. That'll kind of ease up a lot of the things that happen around elections, and kind of solidify the system even better, because the innovations of democracy and being a representative republic and parliamentary democracy are great. And I think Cardano is only going to be able to strengthen that even more, and really give power to a lot of countries that are currently lacking it, and revolutionize a lot of systems that may or may not be failing right now.